All right, we're live for another episode of the New Stack Agents, our podcast about all things AI agents, software development with AI. And this week we've got Andrew. Do you pronounce it Milich or Milik?
Milik.
Milik, that's what I thought. Andrew Milik from Cursor and Tom Moor from Linear. And the reason we've got both of you on is because there's a partnership between the two that just went live a few weeks ago. So we really wanted to talk to you about that. But also really about what it's like building with these tools today. Because you can see it in the background here if you're watching the video. I'm in San Francisco this week. I was at the Workday conference, not because I love HR so much, few people do, but it's because I really want to see how people are building with these tools and some interesting conversations around how CTOs, engineers are figuring out how to get the most out of this. And as it turns out, Workday is actually a Cursor shop, so that works out really well this week. But before we talk about all of that, let's start with you, Andrew, because when I saw your name, it looked really familiar, and then I realized you had been doing Skiff, which then got sold to kind of an email product with some AI built in as well, and you sold that to Notion. So talk to me a little bit about that, and then we'll talk to Tom about his career a little bit.
Yeah. I spent almost 5 years working on email products. Skiff was all about privacy and end-to-end encryption. The Notion Mail is a lot more about productivity and AI, and then realizing the Notion vision of a multi-product Notion Calendar, and Notion Mail ecosystem. And now Cursor is very different direction, but I think what ties them together is being very product led. All the companies, Skiff grew to a few million users. Notion obviously announced, I think, 100 million user milestone. And Cursor, I think, also has really grown almost completely organically for a long time. And now we have customers like Workday, but I think all of them, I just really enjoyed working on great product led, very kind of consumer focused products that then hopefully turn into big enterprise businesses.
Sure. What made you decide to leave? Well, you don't have to go into the details what made you decide to leave Notion, but what made you decide that you really wanted to go to Cursor?
Yeah. I don't think I had a big plan that was like, now's the right time to go and work at Cursor. I think, I was starting to see my peers and myself just adopt Cursor so much. And if you walk around the office and you see, hundreds of people who have Cursor on their main monitor, even if they're not an engineer, they're a PM or they're a data scientist, up to our CTO at Notion was starting to use, and maybe even Ivan, the CEO, using Cursor. And so I think, I loved just the day-to-day of using the product, and then also found it really creative where it can let you build things that were inaccessible before, or like growing up, you try to build a game or a new app or a product, and now that's kind of like one prompt. And so, I know you've had conversations on engineer productivity, but for me, it was not like 10, 15, 25%. It was like 100%, 200%. It was a massive change in how I was doing work.
For sure. Now at Cursor, you're the head of product engineering, correct?
Yeah.
What does that mean day to day for you, what you're doing there?
Well, we still have a pretty small team in general, and then a product team. We probably only have 15 to 20 people who are doing like the real engineering work across, the CLI, the IDE, and then the async agent product, the background agent product. But I think it means, we have a exciting roadmap, some of which is like the future of coding. So we, as a little flag, we're building kind of more of a planning focus mode into Cursor right now, and a bunch of users are starting to try that out. But then also just, making the agent give better results as much as possible. So as an example, like in the latest version, which came out yesterday, we rebuilt like how the agent uses the terminal. And so it's a lot more reliable and you get a lot better results, but that leads into this vision of the agent being able to read and use the execution or the output of your program. And that's also really relevant to the background agent work that we've done.
For sure. Version 1.6 you're at, I think, at this
Exactly,
point. Right?
yes.
And everybody's going down into the terminal with their agents, it seems right now.
Yeah, that gives it a lot of power. It definitely, exposes a lot of complexity, like running scripts and starting your dev server. But I think even in the background, you could imagine, the agent can test an API using the terminal, or it can, start your dev server and then open a browser and look at the output of your program. So I think it gives us a lot of possibilities.
For sure. Tom, we don't want to ignore you there.
No, I was wondering that terminal thing. Did it come out of Kodak, or is it related to that? So the Apple machine learning paper, and they talking about how if you give the give the agent the terminal is like 30% better just through having that, right?
Interesting. I have to look at that. I think we've always wanted it to use the terminal. I think it just didn't. Terminals are really messy. You know, there's like Mac, well, first of all, like even on Mac, you might have like ZSH, Bash, like, multiple different shells people are running. And then also like on Windows, there's WSL, which is like a Unix-based shell, and then PowerShell as well. And so there's a lot of different edge cases. And I think the main motivation was we found that, people are trying to run the same terminal commands, like, or no matter what platform they're on, but they just had really different reliability, even running simple like Git commands. So that was the main motivation. And also users do a bunch of weird things. They might have like custom aliases or like custom functions they put in their shell. So we tried to just make things a lot more simple and reliable. But yeah, I have to check that out too, Tom.
I would be remiss if I didn't plug our episode with Zach from Warp, the other, terminal company from 2 weeks ago. So if you haven't listened to that one, you should probably check that one out. But Tom, Linear, you've been there since 2021, so you've really seen the development of this space. And maybe also for those who aren't 100% familiar with Linear, just give us a brief rundown.
Yeah, sure.
What Linear does.
I think Linear started out through the founders' frustration with the existing issue tracking tools, to be frank, things like Jira and GitHub issues to some extent. But
people are frustrated with Jira? I've never heard that before.
I mean, yes, you've never heard this line of thinking before. But yeah, they were on like Airbnb and Coinbase, which are obviously big users of this. And we're like, wow, is this really the best we can do? In terms of our tooling. So it came out from that, just trying to be like a really excellent issue tracking tool. It's incredibly fast. And I think over the last 5 years or so, we've obviously built on top of that kind of foundation and and now have a tool that's a platform for building products, I want to say, kind of end to end. So like ideas in one end and hopefully code out the other end to some extent. We're not doing every piece of that, obviously, with integrations with Cursor and such, but yeah, that's the general idea.
Does Linear have customers who aren't in the coding software development business, or do you even go after those?
We do, for sure. But the thing is, like, most companies have some code at this point. Like, so we have like car companies, we have like Boom Aero, they're building like supersonic planes. They use Linear. I don't know exactly how much of the plane building process is on there versus just the software portion of their company. But yeah, primarily our target is software companies and building other products like that. Yeah.
Which makes sense. Now you also run another software company on the side. You've got your own little project as well. Outline. Tell us about that for a moment too.
Well, I think it like helps if I briefly like mention my career, I guess, which is basically I've spent my entire 10 years working on like team collaboration communication software since I kind of came to like the Valley in like 2012, and have built like video conferencing, audio conferencing, remote things. This Outline, which is a team documentation product. You could think of it kind of like a Confluence competitor if we're going to go and do the mirror there. That you can run. It's actually open source, so you can go and check out the code and run that if it's of interest. Then I worked at a company called Abstract for 5 years, and we were building version control for sketch files primarily, but also some of the Adobe files. I think there was a bet at the time as to which way the industry would go, and I think we fell on the wrong side of that bet because everything kind of went the Google Docs model, and Figma certainly took over that market. And so yeah, from Abstract I came across to Linear about just over 4 years ago, and just kind of continued that trend. Really, it's like I've always been working on tools which are just for people to communicate and get work done. It feels like.
Sounds like your overall mission is to put Atlassian out of business. Is that a long-term goal?
I'd be happy to take a nice chunk of it.
There you go. Now, I want to talk about the integration between these two platforms, because I think that's really interesting, and also a trend we're seeing in the industry, I think, where more of the work is given to agents, maybe in the form of a GitHub issue or on Linear or somewhere else. So why don't we talk a bit about how this actually came to be? Who introduced who, and how did that all happen?
I was looking at our team chat trying to figure it out, but I think, I mean, Andrew, you could correct me if you were there, I'm not sure, but like Cursor is basically a Linear customer. So I think we were, and then simultaneously we're working on our platform for enabling agents to be first-class citizens inside of Linear. So I think there was a very natural, we have a shared Slack channel. Like we have a shared Slack channel with many of our customers to exchange ideas and get bugs and feedback and stuff. So I think it was a pretty natural thing from our point to start that conversation, at least.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like then there was an inflection point when you came out with the agents API, which I think all of these things were mostly buildable, and we had built a version with the old API, but then I know the, first class agent support with like an agent conversation and, letting users submit follow-ups and see the agent pane on the side. I think that had a lot of buy-in from our team that like we can build something that I think is really good. And yeah, I think that was exciting to see, because I'm curious if that becomes like what all companies end up building, which is like a separate way to interact with their products using like an agent API versus like you could probably build the same thing and then make it pretty good with the original one. And I think we tried that.
Talk to me about this agent. Actually, before we do that, let's talk about what you can actually do with the integration. Then I want to talk about this agent API, because I think that is really interesting.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from our side, our aim was to make it so that, like I said, agents are first-class citizens. The way we see it is Linear is a place where you kind of decide and plan what work gets done. So, like 2-3 years ago, that would obviously be 99.9% humans doing the work on the other side of that. You're assigning it to Andrew. He's going to go and work on it for a few days and come back. We realized that obviously this pattern was coming of like agents being able to do some percentage of the work, whether that's 1%, 10%, 50%. We'll figure that out. And also of agents kind of like living in the cloud, as it were, because like the first versions of Cursor Agent were only available through the desktop client, right? And some of the other things. But it was pretty clear that these things were going to get disconnected and be able to just run autonomously in the background for as long as you need them. So we wanted to make sure that, that's something you could do through Linear. You could just assign an issue to Cursor in this case. Cursor would get pinged, start the work, and then you would have this like dedicated thread to continue that conversation, and also have Cursor feedback all of what it's doing, the files it's looking at, like any questions it has, and so forth. So you can kind of take it from the original issue, which contains hopefully all the context to a pull request.
And of course, that only works because Cursor has the ability to run in the background now and run, not just locally, and not just in the CLI, but there's more to it now. So
yeah, I mean, I think the core technology at Cursor is becoming more and more the coding agent, making it more capable, making it able to run for longer, letting you get better results. The terminal example being one small piece of that. So the main one people are using, many millions of people a day, is the main kind of IDE agent, the right sidebar that everyone uses. Mm-hmm. I think the evolution of that has been, taking the same coding agent and putting it in the cloud so it can run on our infrastructure, like it'll clone your repository and run a task, and then also letting you run it anywhere via the CLI. So that's kind of how we've been taking kind of the same core agent experience, that we are constantly making better. And you can use any model, and we'll work with the model providers to make it excellent, but then like letting you run in the cloud or in your infrastructure. And now, taking that work to where you're kind of getting delegated tasks. So Linear, and we have a Slack integration too, but I think it's really exciting. And the next step for us, I think, is actually if we can kind of, not make teams change how they work today. And so we're experimenting with Linear on actually like automatically running on a few issues. And I know we've talked to the team about that, but I think we don't see that as like, massively different to how it works today, but it's like kind of a behavior shift to say like delegate to an agent and then come back and review its work. Normally you're used to, delegating to a human and then they kind of get the job done. So I hope that it feels a lot more like that, where the agent will take a first pass and then, maybe you can see if it's automatically solved or it can review itself. And then you kind of like stay in your normal flow and give it to a human if to review or to test.
For sure. It's been in the market for a few weeks now. Is that played out the way you expected it to? Is it working the way you expected it to? Are people using it the way you expected?
Yeah, I think we see very, very large demand, including from massive existing customers, to connect these to, to connect the background agent to Linear and to kind of give their engineers this capability. I think we see a lot of enterprises are figuring this out, because running like an async background agent on their infrastructure or on ours is like a bit of a different paradigm. Actually running, an IDE is much simpler. It's either running via like an SSH connection that developers already have, or it's just running on your file system. So they're definitely moving fast to adopt this, but we're figuring out some of the in between. It's also, I think, a bet on like the future capabilities somewhat too, where I think the Cursor agent is extremely good, and all these coding agents. It's quickly become, I think, one of the most popular out there. But I think like in a year it will be way better, and so it's very, very good at like clearly scoped tasks in Linear. So teams that use Linear well will get better results from the Cursor Linear agent. But I think for this to like fully realize and become kind of the primary way teams use AI for coding, we want to see more of the capabilities develop.
Mm-hmm. Same for you, Tom. Is that kind of what you're feeling as well?
Yeah. I think like the really nice thing about this integration in particular is that Linear has so much context, and the context is what the agents often really need to do a really good job. Whether that's like the stack trace that came through from a Sentry integration, the full context of a support ticket, the conversation that some engineers had to kind of like do some initial debugging. And then we can pass that all along to Cursor, so it like stands the best chance of actually doing a good job. And we've seen like teams start to kind of get better at writing tickets because they know that they're going to be consumed by AI, right? Like, oh, let's give it some clues as to where to look, and then it's going to take less passes over time.
Yeah, I forget who I talked to about this in the last few days, but having this additional data come in around how did this issue actually arise, what was talked, what did people say about it, all these things, adds a lot of context. How are you ingesting that context on the Cursor side, and does that change kind of how you're thinking about context as well as you do?
Yeah. Okay. I think a few things. One is the simplest way is just to give a very clear, well-specified prompt, and so I think that's what Tom is talking about. Like Sentry and Datadog and others are great examples where that may have more than enough information to get a good result from the agent. The other is like teams setup context. So I think either you have or are introducing kind of like more prompting at the team level, where you can provide the agent maybe information about your code base or additional instructions. I think the last thing we're seeing some adoption with, even in huge tens of thousands of engineer customers, is MCP, where you can connect that to the background agent or the CLI or Cursor IDE, where they may have like an MCP server that hosts their docs or hosts other integrations, and that's becoming more common as well. And of course, like Linear also has an MCP server that is pretty popular in Cursor, and like I use that, and it's pretty amazing. It's awesome to see the background agent thing work, and we should talk about that. But it's also pretty awesome to be in the IDE and say like, what are the Linear issues assigned to me, and then kind of see them stream in, and then kind of talk to the agent using that method too.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about the background agent, actually, because I wonder how developers feel about that to some degree, right? You assign this, it just goes off, does its thing. How much of a black box is that? How much background information do I get? What's happening there?
Yeah, well, I think it feels a lot like using the Cursor IDE. Like on the web, you can see a full conversation. Linear has a similar conversation sidebar where you can see the things it's doing in real time. And then you can also open it in the IDE. And I think we tried to choose an approach that is very developer centric, not like kind of expecting tasks to always be end-to-end done. We expect developers to review the output, and then open it in the IDE or run locally. So I think the core customer of ours is the professional engineer, and that's a lot of why I joined, because I think we try to kind of make things that make people work faster, but don't expect like this to be the main way like tasks are completed without engineers being involved.
Right. On the linear side, how have you thought about or how are you thinking about the user interface for this as well? As right now I kind of do the add cursor and it works for me, but is that the future? Is that
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're already about 10 iterations into the user interface, I think. It's one of the things that we kind of feel is our secret sauce, is the ability to have like very nicely thought out user interfaces around things.
Sure.
So yeah, right now, the first version, we kind of tried to keep it as similar to working with any other teammate as possible. I want to say, like, we wanted it to feel like as if I was messaging another team member. And I think we've achieved that to some extent. Now we're looking at maybe the places where we should be leaning more into the fact that it's an agent and like actually trying to differentiate it a little bit. If you think about some of the functionality that we started seeing, like being able to kind of like fork conversations, being able to kind of like go back in time a little bit and go, oh, let's redo that, or have 10 conversations going on with different agents at once. Things that you probably wouldn't do with the human teammates, but make more sense. I think there's just these subtle ways that things differ that we're starting to build upon. Things like structured responses. Like one of the things we see from every agent that integrates is one of the first things they need to do is like connect the accounts. Like, who is this I'm talking to, right? So we're introducing like primitives for that, and primitives for things like being able to select repositories and stuff. So like, there's a lot of intricacies around the integration of the two platforms. I think that hopefully between us, we try and do a good job of papering over so that humans don't have to deal with it. But that's why we have the shared Slack channel.
That is the promise. Now, you mentioned the agent API earlier on, and then Andrew also brought up MCP, but it sounds like you decided to set up a specific API is it for the agent to use, or just to work with the agent? What are we talking about there?
Yeah, so like that comes back to this, like the first version, the second version a little bit. So for the first version, we just had the agents use our existing GraphQL API, which is very extensive. It's something we've been building for 5 years now. So you could pretty much clone linear on top of our API, I think, without too much trouble. Maybe if you let the tokens run for long enough, I'm not sure. But so we kind of did that. But then one of the things we realized is there's actually a lot of surfaces inside of linear that it would make sense for agents to have access to and be available in. And also there's like a lot of complexities to deal. It doesn't sound complex, but there's a lot of like intricacies to dealing with comments and comment threads and replies that every agent provider was having to deal with. So we kind of rethought it and created this idea of an agent session in our API, which I don't think is like a unique concept. I think most agents have something similar. So we wanted to codify that, where when a user mentions the agent, mentions cursor or assigns cursor, we send cursor this like concept of an agent session. Here's all the context, and then cursor just has to hit our API with the things it's thinking and its responses with that agent session ID, and it kind of abstracts away the user interface for the most part. You can still use the full GraphQL API to do anything that might make sense to do, though.
Yeah, you could just use the agent's markdown file or something to tell it about how to use an API as well, right? So there's some people do that.
Totally, and we've seen other agents create like custom CLIs for interacting with linear too. So you could just do through that terminal idea. Like, agents are pretty good at using terminals, right? So let's give them a bunch of terminal tools. And
always comes down to the terminal. But Andrew, did that make life easier for you then to have that API?
Yeah, I think I'm curious with the whole set of these like shared interactions agents have, because I think it's normally like one fast reply comment, like we're working on it, then, or like an emoji react, then maybe that gets updated, or like it responds when it's done, or it's like kind of trying to edit and post updates. And then normally like another comment saying this is done, and or like listen to responses on a comment thread to follow up. So I imagine that's what you were seeing basically I'm curious if there's some broader set, but it also is interesting that then the agent like can use MCP and update linear in reverse, which is kind of this weird like circular dependency thing.
It's all very incestuous, I've found, yes.
Yeah.
But like, no, you're right. Like we had that first version, they were like, okay, everybody's doing very similar things here. Let's try and make those things easy. And it's a fine balance though, right? Because this is still so early. Like we don't want to put restrictions in place that don't make sense and like hold you guys back from interesting things you want to do. So we have an open communication channel for that, and we're always adding things, and
yeah,
we're trying to figure it out as we go. Really, I think everybody is.
Yeah, I feel like I think like a year ago, some of these things were buzzwords, even agents. MCP was definitely a buzzword. I've been surprised at how useful, I don't mean as a joke. I mean, actually how useful these are and how widely adopted they've become, even with pretty limited documentation, and resources and like, support for people. People are actually like in, the hundreds of thousands or millions, like really turning these things on and getting a lot of value from them. And, even for a normal Cursor user at Cursor, seeing it able to ask for GitHub issues or ask for linear issues, then like open a browser and then, check Sentry all with MCP or in the background is pretty amazing.
What is it, we're really positive here, but what is it that doesn't work well yet in either in the integration or where there's still issues, or is it just the agent not being able to do the job sometimes, right?
Yeah, I'll just admit, I think the results from the agent, I think we think Cursor is a very competitive, I think you'll get the best results from any async agent in Cursor. That said, I also think the results from the Cursor agent could get better and better and better. I think using program execution like terminal or browser or other stuff, could get better. I think sometimes even using multiple models, so like you could kick off an agent with 3 models, you may get very different results and then one will work. I think that's kind of a product of this like in between, this step function we're going through in capabilities. So I will just admit the pure kind of quality of the code that gets generated is our biggest improvement area.
Sure. What about from the linear side?
I think like a lot of that comes down to, some of it comes down to teaching people what these things are capable of right now and what they're not. It's not unusual even on our own team to see an issue that has just a title and then someone says at Cursor fix this, and it's like, what did you expect to happen exactly here? Like, these things aren't magic. You still need to give it some idea of how to do things, and I think just spending that 1 minute like doing the thinking, some of the thinking yourself to give it this head start goes a long way. And knowing how to kind of like chunk up the work a little bit too. Like I find myself when I'm working on these things, okay, go and work on the migrations for this. Here's some ideas how I want it done. Okay, now let's work on the first 2 API endpoints for this. And like, because the context can get overwhelmed as well. So it's just a much a learning exercise of how to deal with agents in general.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree. Yeah. I think the better your team uses linear, the better results you'll get from the agents that are also using it. And we have found that too. We've built a bunch of automations about connecting user feedback or internal feedback to linear, and sometimes people do exactly the same thing. They say, fix this and include a screenshot. And actually the agent will read that screenshot, but still it may be missing a lot of information.
Occasionally things will work magically, like, wow, you actually understood the layout in that screenshot. And then sometimes it will just not work at all,
yeah,
of course.
That is the state of the technology.
Well, I think what's also cool is there are a lot of these like vertical use cases where it's just like a slam dunk use case, meaning like updating docs, anything dependency related, anything like analytics or data related. I think you'll get really good results. And sometimes it's a crutch, actually. It's like, I can't, I don't want to write this query with 4 joins to understand how, users are adopting XYZ. It's like, take a look at my database schema, add this one query to understand, are people actually connecting their linear account and blah, blah, blah. So I think those are these, use cases we want to keep working on. Same with like observability and data and all of that, where like a stack trace, often you'll get really good investigation results, and performance too. So I think we're going to hopefully see more of those use cases where like maybe teams or like sub teams are starting to adopt it in mass.
One pattern I find works quite well is to point the agent to an existing pull request if you're doing something in a similar vein. So like we have some stuff internally where we have all of our billing plans kind of defined, and it's across like 3 or 4 files, and there's a bunch of strings and constants, and it's just like, oh, we need a new billing plan. Okay, go and look at this last PR that added a billing plan, and I want this one to have this dollar amount and be called this. And it will go and like make like the equivalent changes across all of those files and kind of use it as a template. Or like any sort of like refactoring, which I guess that sounds similar to as well.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we do is for common things like that, I think billing's a great example. For us, people try experimenting with a lot of new agent tools. So agent tools to read docs or search the web and all of that. We have like markdown files that we commit in code and then can reference those in prompts. So it's like open this repository and add a tool to do XYZ. There's a lot of manual work to add it to a bunch of constants and files and front end, back end, all this stuff. And so sometimes these like instruction files that live in your code base can also be really useful. And that will, that will then kind of pay dividends when you're doing it in all these different surfaces in the IDE or in linear or other stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now you've brought up a couple of best practices here. Are there others especially when it comes to thinking about these agents as a teammate who's working in the background? Other best practices you can think of that our audience should know about?
Well, with background agent, something we have like custom environment support. So you could pick like a custom base image, or we'll give you a default base, Linux machine. We'll install dependencies, like we'll install Python and Java and JavaScript, and Node and all this stuff. But I think there's still a good amount of setup cost. I'm curious where that goes, where like, if every team has these like remote dev machines that are set up for agents, or like the agents just will install Node via terminal and you'll let them run for 3 hours. I don't know where that's going to go. I'm curious, Tom, if your team has any tricks there, but I don't have a clear set. Some teams invest a lot in setting up like a base image and environment, and some just like, are fine with it running like type checks and basic things.
I think we're definitely on the latter side of that, on the pragmatic, like run as little as you can to hopefully it runs type checks, and we just try to make those as fast as possible. We spend a lot of like time on developer experience in general at Linear. Like we try to make our internal development experience really nice, and I think that's hopefully started to pay dividends with agents, because the TypeScript checks run fast, the linter runs in seconds, and so you can get more iterations in. So I think like investing in those things now is 2x what it used to be. So I would definitely spend time there as a best practice.
Talking about investing, what about the cost and how to keep that reasonable? Because when these agents run for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, that's a lot of tokens you can burn through.
Yeah. Compared to, an engineer parallelizing their work, I think it's really inexpensive.
I think that's the key, right? Like, and that's why we're seeing such incredible growth in valuations, and like these are no longer, it's not just software, right? It's starting to take budget from other areas a little bit. And at the risk of sounding privileged, like I run the engineering team at Linear, and I don't really think about the cost of these things too much. It's somewhat negligible in comparison to what we pay on GCP and what we pay on salaries. Like we'll look occasionally, like once a month, okay, it's still within a reasonable range, fine. Like we're not going to spend cycles like trying to optimize 10% off our cursor usage or something.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we feel the same way. There's no constraints on, cursor or token usage, which sometimes means people, I've been guilty of this, run hundreds of background agents a day. Like why not just pick every single model on every single task? I think that's where we are. And so there was a while where we would even have it run on every single linear issue right when it was created with multiple models. I think that was not a cost concern. That was a noise concern, where you end up getting these underspecified issues, getting like overspecified agent runs. But I think things hopefully go in that direction. We want every agent run to be high quality. So I think the multiple model thing is more this product of like model innovations is still really fast. So you actually will get different results. But I think eventually, it may cost $1.50 to run on a linear issue, which is just such a cheap option to fix a bug or save an engineer's time on, a more important problem.
Yeah, for sure. No, you did mention. Oh, sorry, Tom.
No, I was just going to say, like we have, if I can, like we have part of the product that's built into Linear now is this thing called product intelligence on like our higher tier plans, and that literally is an agentic system that runs on every issue that comes into triage. So every issue that comes in from support, we go and like do the research on it. Basically, it'll go and it'll look for similar issues, follow the knowledge graph, find who's been working on things, and so forth. And it comes back and we can auto apply labels, projects, assignees, and basically
I'm a pretty heavy user of that. I'm one of the heavier Linear users on our team, and I think it's great. And it also like hopefully gets good results from the cursor part, which is I see the little badge to assign to like the product team or like a label with a terminal bug or a chat bug, and then it kind of goes and does work.
But we had this discussion, is the reason I bring it up, because it's like, wow, this is actually quite costly as far as infrastructure goes to go and do this for every issue. Sometimes it runs for 20 seconds, sometimes it runs for like over a minute, just researching, if it's like a complex thing. And we've decided that we've just baked that into our plans at this point. And we're just going to do it for every single issue because the value is there, especially on bigger teams. It's just such a huge value to have that research done up front.
And of course, the cost of the models. Well, the cost of the models is going down, but they're burning more tokens. So yeah, kind of holds itself in equilibrium, it seems.
We're always betting, like, I feel like the whole thing is a little bit of a bet on the future. Hopefully not in like a bubbly way, but it's like, okay, this is great now. Like, what's it going to be in a year or two? It's obviously going to be better. And it's going to be cheaper, like to your point, like at least for the same level of intelligence. But it's usually just every iteration we decide we want more intelligence instead of cheaper.
Yeah,
it's true. It's true. Now, Andrew, you brought up, running dozens of agents in the day. What about one thing that I feel like is still a bit unclear how the industry is going to work with this is having those agents interact with each other then and work together on a problem, or know, because I may have two agents working on the same code base, but they may not know what they're all doing. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah. Well, okay. I think that's somewhat inevitable. Like even people in the IDE without, fancy background agent custom environment setups often are running many agents at once. I think the agents are getting better at like not running into each other through simple mechanisms, like not editing the same file at the same time, and then complicated ones like AI can do a pretty good job at most merge conflicts, like especially simple ones. Yeah, I think that's the extent of how we're thinking about it today. And then we're trying other interfaces for like letting people have control over them. So like a new interface in Cursor where instead of just being a right sidebar, the agent conversation is like, more front and center. And then, instead of a left sidebar being just files, you would see a list of agents. So I think that gives people a better overview of what they're working on. One limitation we run into is like people don't by default like have 30-second attention spans and kick off task after task. Like I think people like engineers, I find in my experience, I don't often just think, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this, in 1 minute and kind of kick off multiple agents. So I think that's something that we feel pretty stuck on today. It's like people don't by default gravitate towards running like 10 agents at once. So, in the Linear case too, that's why we think some of this automatically running and screening issues for being a good candidate for Cursor is much easier than saying, change your workflow of the PM, engineer, designer, whoever to, run Cursor on 5 things and go review 5 things.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Though if our attention spans get shorter and shorter, we may just...
Well, I have another theory, which is like that 22-year-old engineers have a big leg up because, they've had their attention span like eaten away at by TikTok and Instagram and everything else. So it should feel familiar to run, agent after agent and then kind of click between them.
You say that like it's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet. The jury will be out.
I try not to judge the younger generation, we will, like, at least on Linear side, we can try and help with this a little bit. We try and we have the inbox, and once you've started a bunch of agents, we'll kind of like surface which ones need attention. So you can kind of go and keep things quite asynchronous, but send a bunch of things off, come back later and go through them. When you have time is often like a really nice way to work on things. And from the multi-agent point of view, I think we haven't seen a lot of it yet, but we are thinking of it from like maybe like one step higher, which is this coordination. So for example, we might have the Sentry agent that goes and does the investigatory work and then passes it off to the Cursor agent, or we have like Devin will has an integration that their entire integration is trying to make sure that an issue is really well specced. So you have like one agent speccing the issue, one agent researching the bug, one agent doing the work. We already have like code review agents, which are one of the most useful agents out there today, in my opinion. I've certainly seen them save some terrible bugs from going out the door personally. So I don't know. I think you guys have seen good growth on that too, right, Cursor?
Yeah, so we have a code review product called BugBot that definitely has gotten a lot of adoption, and I think it's so helpful internally. And I've seen some rumblings on code review from Linear Twitter, so I'm curious how you're thinking about that side of things, or maybe it's too early to say.
But that is it comes up when I talk to CTOs a lot. That's what they want. That's kind of a bottleneck, and as we create more code, we need more tools to review that code, right? So it's kind of pretty straightforward that that's an area where these models are really good at too. So it makes sense to invest there. What else? All right, fire agent.
New York, what can I say?
Here you go. Now I've been waiting for somebody to knock on my hotel door here and trying to clean the rooms. It's just a matter of
Oh
time.
no.
What was I going to ask you? Interface, the user interface. I asked Tom about this, but also for you, Andrew. Like, it feels like we're still maybe in the first phase of how we're interacting with all of these tools. Like, what's next there? How are you thinking about the future of what that's going to look like, interacting with these agents?
It's a good question. I think, that change I mentioned on experimenting with a new layout inside Cursor of going from a right sidebar agent, which we're starting to see adopted in more products too. Like the Notion agent works this way now, where you have kind of like your main work surface and then the sidebar is like kind of the AI pane. With Cursor, we're experimenting kind of moving that out of the right sidebar and making it more front and center and letting the agent kind of self-direct where you're looking. So let it, open files and, instead of like you starting at a file and running an agent, it's like you're starting with the agent and then it terminal as you need. That's a smaller piece of it. Yeah, I think that, I don't know. That's probably the main thing we're thinking on the interface right now. And then I mentioned kind of like a more planning focused mode. So I'm curious if we end up saying like the agents have gotten so good at these minimal tasks that where it's really going to help is like just coming up with a plan, and maybe the plan actually lives in a markdown file or something that your team can share and reference, and or you're kind of referencing in future chats. So I think that's kind of a little on the horizon of something. And we already see that where, and Tom, you probably have engineers on your team who like enjoy making markdown files, maybe with AI to kind of scope out a task. And so we see that happen a lot. And we're wondering if this is where the next way people are working with agents is going.
I've done it myself. Certainly spec'd out a feature fully and then gone, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Sometimes I don't know. I'm curious if like, all this stuff is in between and then you just get the really, really good models that are able to kind of come up with great plans without needing more specificity. But there are other times where like a short prompt just genuinely does not have enough specificity, like adding a button or, changing a setting or something where you genuinely kind of want the back and forth, like the deep research style of follow up with 4 questions, and then go and run off on a task. That may be another thing we're going to try. Or actually, I think we are trying that.
My dream for the interface is really for things just to be even just far more connected and integrated than they are today. Like I feel like you should be able to seamlessly have conversations with these things in one context, move it to Linear, move it to GitHub for the review process, and it should feel like you're interacting with the same entity. It's keeping the knowledge. It knows what you said over in Slack. And now it feels still quite disjointed, and so I really hope that we can achieve that over time.
Yeah, it's a theme too, right? There's a lot of tooling we're still kind of figuring out to some degree in the back end of how these things are going to work together and how they're going to work themselves and interact with other tools, right? So that's still early on. What else is top of mind for both of you in this world of AI right now? What are you most excited about, even outside of your own product? No, you're only thinking about your own product.
Yeah, you got me in that headspace.
Any advances, any models you're playing with, any
The one thing we haven't talked
hardware?
about that like which is kind of like ironic in a way, is that like we actually don't have a linear agent, but we are kind of working on that, right? Like once you say it, it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of a big missing gap there. So I'm kind of excited for that and how it changes how you interact with the product. And I see, like, to my point before, like I see that as like the personification of linear in hopefully lots of different services. And yeah, like we're playing with that internally, and it feels really nice, and I'm excited to get that out there.
Yeah, I think one complaint I have, I still think AI email is not solved at all, either the replying or whatever agents responding. I think we did a lot with Notion Mail that we got excited about, and you'll see that in the product, like auto labeling and stuff. But I think it's totally unsolved, and like Gmail Smart Compose with like the first version of Tab autocomplete I really liked. Yeah, I think it's shocking that coding feels like it's jumping forward by light years every month, and then email still feels like relatively underserved with AI.
Yeah, in Gmail you still know it's a smart reply when it's got an exclamation mark at the end for no reason whatsoever.
I'm guilty of using some of those too, and Notion Mail we have a version of that we built. But yeah, honestly, that's like a 2022, 2023, maybe 2024 high quality with some context stuff. It's not, doesn't scratch the itch of like email agent that I still think could be done.
You're hoping for.
When are the home assistants gonna get any of this stuff? That's my question. That's what I'm excited about. Like, how are we like 3-4 years into this, and like Google Home is still as dumb as it is?
Well, it's supposed to get the Gemini update around this time, right? It's about to roll out, and
I'm ready for my personal assistant. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, same, and with Apple being so far behind all of this, so.
It feels like the models are capable, but it's just everything around it that has to happen.
Yeah, at least Gemini should be able to turn on my lights. That's just a minimum requirement.
I know we have, on like one side, we have people falling in love with the models, and then on the other side, you can't reliably control your home.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I'll see if I can get somebody from Google on who can talk to me about that. So
please,
if they're listening, they should contact me. But hey, guys, I really appreciate it. It's a great conversation. It's a lot of fun, and you guys brought up Sentry a couple of times too. Next week, we're going to talk to Sentry about security in this area as well. So that's going to be a fun one too. So
that's great.
Yeah. Appreciate it, both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.